Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller film named The Black Death. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins in the year 1565, during the reign of King Mahachakrapat of Ayutthaya, when a terrifying plague descended upon the land. Legend has it that the plague was brought to Siam by Portuguese ships, leading to the deaths of thousands. What was even more horrifying was that those infected by the disease didn't simply die. They transformed into monstrous, bloodthirsty zombies. Time passed, and several months went by. Due to the poor transportation and slow spread of information at the time, many parts of the kingdom remained unaware of the dreadful plague's existence. On a bright spring afternoon, a passionate young couple was enjoying an intimate but smelly hormone yoga by a river. Suddenly, the boy saw a figure in the water. Thinking it was a peeping Tom, he cursed and waded in to catch the intruder, only to be dragged under by something unseen. The girl, worried for her lover's safety, covered her smelly parts and cautiously approached the riverbank. She arrived only to see the water stained crimson where her boyfriend had just vanished. A few days later, two hunters tracking a wild boar in the mountains stumbled upon the man's mangled corpse. The experienced pair quickly determined that the wounds on his body were not from any wild animal but looked more like human bite marks. Meanwhile, in a town opium den, a greasy man nicknamed Chubby was enjoying the dual pleasures of illegal substances and the company of a beautiful girl. Just as he was about to get more intimate, he realized the girl was deaf and mute. His heart softened, and for once, he acted like a true gentleman without performing a hormone yoga session with her. He gave her his coin purse and left. He later returned to his simple lodging to drink and chat with his fellow laborers. A friend pointed to a man passed out drunk on the floor, explaining that this man, Kam, was once an undefeated general. However, a few months prior, his entire army had been mysteriously wiped out during a campaign. After returning home, Kam fell into despair and became the town drunk. What they didn't know was that Kam's army had faced the terrifying zombie plague, and that same plague was now closing in on their remote town. That night, an ill-fated man carrying a torch was heading home for dinner when he heard a strange noise from the woods beside the road. He stopped and looked around, but it was too late. A sprinting zombie tackled him to the ground, and he was quickly devoured by a horde. When his body was discovered, it was a mangled corpse covered in pustules. The head monk of the local temple and his apprentice, Jack, were the first to arrive at the scene. The monk examined the body with a deep frown and concluded that the plague ravaging the country had finally reached their town. Upon hearing this, Jack immediately snuck off to the home of the village's wealthiest landlord. It turned out he and the landlord's daughter, Pim, were secretly in love. However, Pim's father looked down on the poor young man and had repeatedly tried to keep them apart. Jack saw this as an opportunity to sneak into Pim's room and convince her to elope with him on a merchant ship that was passing through town. Unfortunately, the old landlord was one step ahead. Before Jack could finish his proposal, he was caught by several farmhands and beaten to a pulp. Still not satisfied, the landlord was about to draw his knife and castrate the boy. Seeing this, Pim rushed out to plead with her father, promising publicly that she would never see Jack again. Only then did the landlord spare him. The well-informed landlord also knew about the Black Death zombies appearing near the town and realized that staying was a death sentence. The next day, he ordered his family to pack their valuables for a full-scale relocation. But Pim, still unable to forget Jack, secretly slipped out of the carriage mid-journey. When her mother noticed she was gone, she feared her husband's anger and went after Pim alone. But being older, she wandered lost in the woods and couldn't find a trace of her daughter. Meanwhile, the landlord discovered that both his wife and daughter were missing and ordered the convoy to turn back. Suddenly, horrifying snarls echoed from the dark woods. The landlord grabbed a torch to see, but the zombie horde had already surrounded them. The servants and farmhands were paralyzed with fear and were quickly annihilated. At the same time, the town's brothel was still a scene of music and revelry. The mute girl, whom Chubby had taken a liking to, was entertaining a client in the main hall. Unfortunately, she was a lightweight and became tipsy before the client was satisfied. The client, seeing her state, decided to pay her fee and let her rest. But when he reached for his purse, he found it was gone. Without asking any questions, the brothel manager blamed the mute girl for the theft. He had her tied to a pillar in the hall and began whipping her brutally. Fortunately, Chubby was passing by and intervened, rescuing the mute girl by paying 3 times her fee. Desperate to escape, the nearly beaten-to-death girl poisoned the drinks of the manager and the owner. The elderly owner couldn't take it and died on the spot, but the manager somehow survived. The mute girl fled during the chaos. Now certain that the mute girl had tampered with the drinks, the manager and two of his muscular henchmen gave chase. The mute girl ran for her life, and just as her strength gave out, ran into her savior, the drunkard, Calm, who was out for a stroll with his sword. She grabbed his leg and pleaded for help with desperate, inarticulate sounds. After Calm nodded, she quickly ran off into the woods. The manager was about to pursue her when Calm tossed a cloth bundle at him. A henchman opened it to find a severed zombie head inside. Realizing the Black Death had arrived, the manager forgot all about catching the mute girl and rushed back to town with his men. But the town was already being overrun by zombies. The villagers, unfamiliar with the plague, thought their zombified neighbors were possessed by evil spirits. They called upon both the old Buddhist monk from the temple and the priest from the Christian church. The old monk, who had some knowledge of the zombies, stood at a safe distance and merely instructed his apprentice Jack to investigate. The priest, however, was more hands-on. He walked right up to the restrained zombie, intending to give it a full health examination. At that critical moment, the zombie suddenly broke free of its ropes and bit into the priest's neck. It then scrambled up the rafters, found a good vantage point, and pounced on Jack. Luckily, Jack had learned some martial arts at the temple and managed to hold off the zombie's snapping jaws. He grabbed a nearby wooden bucket and smashed it against the creature, sending it flying like a Barbie toy. Fueled by adrenaline, Jack then repeatedly slammed the bucket onto the zombie's head until it was a pulpy mess. Only then did he run outside to regroup with his companions. By now, a large horde of zombies had flooded the town, pouncing on countless unsuspecting villagers. In the nick of time, Calm, sword in hand, rushed to the blacksmith shop and saved his lover, the blacksmith lady. The blacksmith lady was a formidable woman herself. After learning that the zombie's weak spot was their head, she dropped her cleaver, picked up two large hammers from a table, and charged out to fight alongside Calm. They were unaware that the situation at the brothel was just as dire. The manager was cornered by a zombie. He grabbed an antique firearm from his office display, but due to lack of maintenance, it failed to fire. Retreating, he snatched an antique sword from its sheath, only to remember in that instant that he had secretly swapped the blade for a fake. The sheath contained nothing but a hilt. Just as the regretful manager was about to be overtaken, a loud bang echoed, and the zombie exploded into pieces before him. It was the security head who had arrived with a 100-pound front-loading cannon to save the day. At this point, the mute girl, who had escaped earlier, circled back to the village, only to find it had become a paradise for zombies. In a panic, she was nearly bitten by a white-bearded zombie. At the last second, the beardless Chubby killed the bearded zombie, once again playing the hero. This time, the mute girl threw all caution to the wind and embraced Chubby, crying her eyes out. Soon after, Chubby and Jack joined a group of refugees heading back to the temple. There they ran into Pim's mother, who had failed to find her daughter. She begged Jack for help, telling him that Pim had disappeared in the woods east of the village. Jack quickly enlisted his friend Chubby, and they followed the trail, eventually finding Pim trapped in a hut, besieged by several zombies. Though screaming at her full chicken lungs, Pim was quick-witted. When a zombie broke in, she grabbed a hoe to defend herself, managing to hold on until Jack and Chubby arrived. Meanwhile, a large number of zombies had followed the refugees and surrounded the small temple. To boost everyone's morale, the head monk sat cross-legged and began chanting Buddhist scriptures. The uninformed villagers, believing the scriptures could repel the zombies, gathered around him to pray for protection. Unfortunately, as he chanted, a villager who had been bitten earlier began to convulse. His eyes snapped open, and he started attacking every living person around him. The villagers who were barricading the door saw zombies inside the temple as well and fled in terror. Attacked from both inside and out, the temple quickly fell. Just then, Calm and the blacksmith lady reached the temple gates. Seeing it had been overrun, they charged in to save people. Upon entering, they saw several zombies on top of the mute girl. Calm dispatched them with a single stroke of his sword, then pulled the mute girl up and rushed back out. Pim's mother tried to follow, but she was a few steps too slow and was instantly swarmed by 3 zombies, meeting her end on the spot. The trio who escaped the temple ran towards the village's other stone building, the brothel. They ran into the brothel manager and the security head. The manager already had a grudge against Calm, who didn't pay the prostitute fee, so he immediately ordered the doors to be shut. But Calm's group was faster and managed to force their way inside. As the two sides faced off in a tense standoff, Jack and Chubby, having rescued Pim, returned to the temple, only to find the bodies of the monk and Pim's mother. With no time for grief, they fought their way through the streets, coincidentally ending up at the brothel's gate. Seeing his friends outside begging for help, Com prepared to open the door, but the brothel manager, fearing zombies would get in, ordered the security head and his men to stop him. The two factions immediately clashed. Com single-handedly held off 3 men, positioning himself in front of the gate. When a man tried to sneak attack him with a knife, the blacksmith lady, who was not one for games, threw a hammer that struck the brothel manager, gravely wounding him. With the brothel manager out of the way, the others finally agreed to open the door and save their friends. They all charged out, weapons raised, and cut down the zombies surrounding the entrance before retreating back inside together. But just as they were closing the door, the swarming zombies wedged it open. Com furiously hacked at the zombies stuck in the gap. Though missing limbs, the zombies, immune to pain, continued to push their way in. Just as they were about to be overwhelmed, an elderly henchman let out a roar and charged out into the horde, allowing the others to finally shut the door. Outside, the henchman was swarmed and quickly killed. The remaining 8 survivors found a moment of peace. Com announced that the brothel had enough call girls but lacked food and supplies, making a long-term defense impossible. Call girls can't meet their desires and demands in this dire situation, so he declared he would lead a breakout at dawn and told anyone who wanted to join him to be ready. As for those who didn't, they would have to fend for themselves. With that, he went to find a place to rest. The others also dispersed to rest. Chubby, hoping for one last indulgence, found an opium pipe in the brothel's storeroom and lay on a bed taking deep drags. He was unaware that his presence had awakened a female zombie in the same room. Seeing a figure behind the curtain, Chubby thought it was the mute girl coming to please him. Just as he was about to whisper a sweet nothing, the female zombie pounced and bit him in the groin, obviously wanting to have a zombie baby with him. Screaming in pain, Chubby grabbed the opium pipe and shoved it down the zombie's throat, narrowly avoiding a fatal bite. The commotion drew the others. Seeing the female zombie was still trying to attack, Com sliced her head off with his sword without hormone mercy. Jack quickly found a cloth to bandage Chubby's wound, while the mute girl stepped forward to take care of him. As they watched the black venom spread up Chubby's leg, everyone knew it was only a matter of time before he turned. For the safety of the group, Jack and Com agreed that Jack should be the one to put his friend out of his misery. Just as he was about to strike, the mute girl reached out and stopped the blade, motioning that she would do it. Jack agreed, since he couldn't bear to do it anyway. But the mute girl had no intention of killing Chubby. Instead, she held him tightly, choosing to die with him. As Chubby began to turn, more and more zombies from outside broke through the main doors and swarmed into the brothel. Facing the chaos, Com was the first to charge out, slashing wildly. The security head also joined the fray, using his 100-pound cannon to smash through the horde. To relieve the pressure in the main hall, Com ran out into the courtyard, shouting to draw the majority of the zombies after him. The security head, being less agile, was bitten. Undeterred, he summoned all his strength and slammed the cannon onto the ground. The gunpowder hidden inside the barrel instantly detonated, and with a massive explosion, all the zombies in the brothel were blown to smithereens. Jack and Pim had left earlier and were unharmed by the blast. The blacksmith lady, who was a step behind, was thrown by the shockwave and covered in wounds, but her will to survive pushed her back to her feet. Clutching her 2 hammers, she ran all the way to the river, where she finally saw a merchant ship anchored in the middle. Desperate to live, the blacksmith lady mustered her remaining strength and swam towards it. When she finally climbed onto the deck, she collapsed, gasping for air in blissful relief. But what awaited her on the ship was not salvation, but a horde of starving zombies. Meanwhile, Jack had also escaped to the riverbank with Pim, but Pim's face had turned deathly pale. She lifted her skirt and showed Jack that she had been bitten the day before. She explained that she had hidden it because she was afraid he wouldn't escape on his own. After telling him this, she gave him a deep, loving kiss but without a hormone yoga session, then took out a knife, stabbed her smelly part, and thus ended her own life. Having lost his love, Jack was overcome with despair and raised his sword to kill himself. With a clang, his blade was knocked away by another. He looked up to see Com, who had once again fought his way through the horde. Com urged him to live on to avenge Pim. Spurred by Com's words, Jack grabbed his sword, channeling all his grief into a murderous rage, and charged towards the zombies scattered along the riverbank. Together, they became the infamous duo of zombie slayers, known throughout the land. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.